This is my presentation on my ideas concerning invisibility and holodeck technology on both the high-tech and low-tech levels, the low-tech being the proof of the high-tech scenario of applying invisibility and holodeck technology, and also how my work relates to a cosmic significance, the holographic principle. Um, this is these are diagrams of how I first came up with sending the light through an object. This is back in 1998. These are some sketches that I had in an art gallery at one time. And the first one, there was supposed to be a first one, but that was too damaged to show. But the second one, the first one had a just simple TV camera in front and behind a person to bring the background environment, the scenery, through to the front of the person. This adds on to that. This is a double TV and camera, a tiny camera in the middle of a TV, and it sends light through in both directions. The front of the front TV, and the back of the back TV, to send light through front and back in both directions. This is a big step in imagining how to send light through at all angles around a person, except I drew the person inside. I kept the person inside. This is looking head down at the person, or it could be an object or anything. And this shows the lines of how tiny cameras and TVs would have to be hooked up to each other to send light around at all different angles. If you took the person out of it and looked at it as an illustration, it would look like this. This is this is sort of like a triptych, I think that is, in art, where there's 3 different panels, but these fold into each other, sort of like a mix between a triptych and a Boys Clare picture, like a 2-sided or a 3-way picture. They is spliced into each other, each angle of view, and there's the lines going down through this wraparound splice view panorama. And it was simply a matter of creating the interface, coming up with the discovery of the interface, which is a smaller version of the TV camera units. And you can't see the lines that I've drew, but they symbolize the wires of fiber optic bundles connecting the outer 3D pixels to their corresponding TVs. The outer TVs, corresponding TVs on the interface, and the person is in between. So that's the beginning of how to make something invisible, and you just expand that to a 3-dimensional, many-faceted TV sphere. And but these were my starting points back around 1998. I've had my ideas since 1992, but this was my only art presentation. And so then these 3 pictures show my concept of the interface. In this picture, the image above the line, someone sent me a drawing, a diagram of how light should go through an object to make it appear invisible. The thing they got right was the 3D pixels. This is a cross section, by the way, of 3D pixels, showing that light must come at one angle and go through at the other angle at the opposite side, as though nothing was there. That's my concept of the light interface. It's a smaller concentration of the space that the object is resting in, the volume of space in its shape that the object is resting in, but in a more concentrated form, to allow a person to exist in between the outer surface of the invisible object and in between the outer surface and the light interface within, because you're sending light through duplication, a concentrated duplication of the space that the object's taken up, because the outer 3D pixels are connected to their counterpart 3D pixels on the surface of the light interface. And this is just a three-dimensional view. This is showing what it might look like. This doesn't have the 3D pixels on there, or they're too tiny to see in this diagram. But if you could just imagine the 3D pixels being on the surface of both the outer object and the interface. This shows the interface connected to the 3D pixels on the interface connected to its outer 3D pixels on the surface of the object, with fiber optic bundles in between each three-dimensional picture element. The interface also solves the problem of making objects with moving parts invisible. If the fiber optics were hardwired for one three-dimensional picture element to all the rest, you'd have to change every time there was movement with the appendages of this proposed invisible battlesuit with a puppet light interface inside. So that's what the interface can do. This shows the previous one-to-many connection between fiber optic wire, single fiber optic wire strands and 3D pixels, and you can see it's hardwired, but you can see it still sends light through. But if you tried to alter anything with moving parts, you couldn't do it. There would be a mismatch between the light going in and the light coming out. So that's the reason a simple fabric could never make somebody completely invisible, three-dimensionally invisible. This is again my interface idea. This is invisibility with interface. Instead of a one-to-many fiber optic wire to every other 3D picture element hardwired, this is a one-to-one correspondence between the outer 3D picture elements of the invisible object, in this case a cross-section of a cube, and its counterpart 3D pixel on the interface, which again takes the same shape as the object that you want to make invisible, but in a more concentrated form, because you're mimicking the space that the object is resting in, but in a more concentrated form, in order to have something exist in between the outer surface of an invisible object and inside, between the light interface and the outer surface. This is the highest form of 3D invisibility, because light is going through the object, through its 3D picture elements in their one-to-one correspondence with their counter 3D picture elements on the interface. Light is going through the cross-section of the sphere at regular intervals. Any other shape would have less 3D symmetry, but you can increase the resolution of invisibility by increasing the number of fiber optic wires in each corresponding one-to-one corresponding fiber optic bundles between the 3D picture elements. The part that I've been wanting to get to is this. If you stood inside the interface, it makes logical sense, or makes sense or whatever, that if light is going through the object at regular intervals, creating invisibility, if you happen to stand inside the interface, you would see the light coming through three-dimensionally, painting a three-dimensional mural all along the interior walls of the interface. So that's the inverse relationship between invisibility and holodeck technologies. If you send light through an object, its byproduct is a holodeck. Invisibility and holodeck technology are inversely related to each other. You turn an invisible object outside in, you have a holodeck. You turn a holodeck inside out, you have an invisible object. But if you stood inside the interface, you couldn't be invisible to the outside world. Matter of fact, you'd be magnified to the outside world. But if there was a dual interface connected to the outside sphere to make you appear invisible, while you also had a light interface converted into a holodeck connected to a computer that ran a holodeck program, this is the beginnings of an hypothetical, what I call an artificial parallel reality orb, or an APRO. You're invisible to the outside world while you're living in a holodeck inside the interior of the invisible sphere. Chosen the sphere because it has the highest form of three-dimensional resolution for invisibility and holodeck technology. And this is a simple idea. It's really simple. I'm not sure why the Star Trek writers haven't thought of it before. Simply wrap a Klingon cloaking device around a Star Trek The Next Generation holodeck, and you have an artificial parallel reality. This is more philosophy, or it's a paradox that I have that I call ghost interfacing, and it's about if you have a theoretically or hypothetically perfectly invisible sphere to both matter and light, and it's a philosophical idea of what happens if you have two idea APROs, or artificial parallel reality orbs. But this is just something that I think about. It's not really related to the technology of invisibility and holodeck technologies. This is this is something that I don't really talk about because I'm not quite sure if I got it right or not. But this is about sending having a teleconference or telepresence with somebody else in another holodeck. And this shows the wiring of how you would have an object in the interior of the interface instead of just outside its boundaries to appear three-dimensional within the interior of another interface, or interface converted holodeck. But I don't talk too much about these because I'm not quite sure if I got it right or not. These are just my investigations into a simple invisible sphere, the basic pixelizations, trying to show a side view and a front view, or different views. This is my proposed three-dimensional picture element. It wouldn't just simply be a lenticular screen. You would have a half sphere that would have fiber optic wires hooked to it, connected to its outer surface, and it would be connected to the top surface of a smaller sphere, half sphere 3D picture element, which would be the counterpart of the 3D picture element on the outside of the object. This would connect to the interface. This would be how to send light through an object at the same angle that it came in at, but in a smaller, more concentrated form to connect to the interface. This is some stuff I got offline, some pictures. This is called a Rochester cloak. This shows how to send light through an object to make it appear invisible. These people have about the same idea I have, but they send their light through by some sort of computer, a computer program or a computer detection system, but they use three-dimensional picture elements on both sides of an object to take light apart, send it through their computer system, which looks like a representation of my interface, and comes back out the fiber optics or whatever those wires are to the correct three-dimensional picture elements to have the person see the object as if they were looking through it. You can look up the Rochester cloak online on YouTube to find out more about how it works. But I've had my work. Our ideas are simply the same, but mine uses the light interface to send light through an object to make it appear invisible. And its byproduct is a holodeck inside the interface. And if you splice the interface to create two interfaces, you'd have one to send light through an object to make you appear invisible while you exist in a holodeck version of another interface. So I've had my work for since 1992, since the New Year winter of 1992. I've had my ideas more or less in their final form. Okay, now here's the low-tech aspect of my work. This is my lenticular box. These are pictures of its views at different angles. This shows how to take pictures to put on a lenticular box. You go to the different angles around an imaginary box, just the frames of an imaginary box, and you take pictures of an environment at all 30 views around the box. On a view that's side by side with each other, you take pictures next to each other, next to yourself, for an edge on view. For a straight on view, you simply make a half turn and take a picture of a straight on view, and you do this for all sides of the box. And this is the layout to put a lenticular box together. This is the photographic layout, color coded to show where they apply on the box. And this shows how 30 different pictures come together to create 18 different viewing angles around the edges, the facets of a lenticular box. This shows how to cut the images, cut the pictures once developed and positioned to add onto the box. You're just creating a slot and a groove for them to fit into each other. And this shows the invisibility holodeck inverse relationship on a low-tech level for the lenticular box. This shows the low-tech splice view panorama, exterior splice view panorama, the low-tech invisible aspect of the lenticular box. This shows an interior splice view panorama by switching the panels with their opposing sides and replacing the adjacent colored louvers on each panel with their corresponding partner, denoted by the arrows and the lines connecting them. And you do this at all 8